Have you ever seen someone go completely out of control before someone could step in? That's exactly the atmosphere surrounding Atlanta, which fans are already calling one of the most dramatic and tense love and hip-hop scenarios. Because many stories circulating online suggest that a fierce confrontation involving Bambi, Mendeecees, Harris, and Yandy Smith may have gone too far for everyone in that room. Before we even talk about what people are saying, let's be clear. Reports, reactions, and what others believe they heard or saw are the foundation for all of this. Even though nothing here is presented as verifiable fact, the story itself is captivating enough to spark conversation, and this hasn't prevented the internet from going berserk. It all supposedly started with an accusation that no one expected to be made out loud, especially in front of cameras. Witnesses said that Bambi didn't hold back and made a statement that instantly altered the atmosphere in the room. Do you recall those moments when everyone simply freezes and becomes less energetic? Yes, that kind of stillness. According to what's being said online, attendees responded in a way that nobody expected. According to those with direct knowledge of the situation, you could sense the anxiety building moment by moment. Some claim that his body language changed significantly, some claim that voices were raised, and some even speculate that things may have gotten physical. Though the details are still up for debate and nothing is conclusively proven. But everyone seems to agree that emotions were running high at the time and control had been lost. But what really shocked onlookers was Yandy's reaction. Insiders said that instead of stepping in immediately, she appeared overloaded, caught between defending a loved one and processing what had just been said. Fans are now saying that she looked like she was about to cry as the situation got out of hand. What really transpired in that room? And why is everyone telling a slightly different version of the same tale, is the question that keeps coming up. The room was cramped, like if it were about to blow up, even before a word was said. As people gathered, cameras rolled, and conversations were quiet but strained, it was clear from everyone's avoidance of eye contact that something deeper had been forming behind the scenes. Bambi's expression as she sat there was more than just irritation. It was as though she had been holding on to something for a while and had now made the decision to stop being silent. Mendeecees Harris, the person across from her, initially leaned back in an effort to remain composed, but even in those early moments, you could see a shift in his attitude. It was weak, but it was there, as though he knew where this conversation would go before it even got there. Standing close by, Yandy Smith seemed caught between the two, looking from one to the other as though trying to assess the situation before it went out of control. Will we just sit here and pretend that nothing is wrong? Everyone abruptly straightened up as Bambi finally spoke, breaking the silence. Her voice was strong enough to silence the music in the room, even if it wasn't loud at first. In the background, someone was moving about in their seat. As someone else said something under their breath, no one dared to speak up. Mendeecees let out a leisurely breath and shook his head slightly. I don't know what you're trying to do right now, he replied calmly, but his jaw was clearly tense. It felt less like a response and more like a warning, cloaked in calm. Bambi was not going to give up. She did, in fact, lean forward and look at him as though she had already made up her mind. Nah, don't do that, she said, increasing her voice just enough to break any lingering calm. Because you know exactly what I mean. The moment she uttered those words, the atmosphere in the room instantly shifted. Fans who later discussed this moment said it was like watching a movie where everyone knows at the same time that things are going to get serious. As if they didn't want to miss a second of what was going to unfold, even the crew behind the camera seemed to pause. Feelings were running high. You're playing a risky game, Mendeecees remarked, sounding less confident than before. He now leaned forward to match her stance, and the quiet distance between them started to feel closer. When it comes to what you think you heard or what other people have been telling you, you have to proceed with extreme caution. Yandy raised her hand in an attempt to defuse the situation before it got worse. Can't we do this right now? She spoke in a softer but clearly stressed voice. That's all inappropriate here. But Bambi shook her head right away. No, she shot back. This is the precise place. Because I'm tired of people acting as though they don't understand what's happening. I'm tired of the silence. The word silence hung in the air more than anything she had said. A single moment was no longer the focus. She appeared to be drawing attention to a bigger problem that had been overlooked for far too long. Viewers later remarked that this was the exact point at which a simple disagreement turned into something much more significant. Mendeecees' expression changed again, more pronouncedly this time. The calmness in the room was giving way to something sharper, and people were shifting nervously. "You don't get to throw words around like that," he retorted in a sharper tone. "You can't just say things and assume there won't be any repercussions. Consequences?" Bambi repeated, sounding almost like she was laughing, but there was no humor in it. "Would you like to talk about consequences right now? Where was that energy before?" Yandy was obviously shaken at this time. Her eyes flickered between her hands, which pulled together as though she was trying to keep her equilibrium. "Please, both of you," she begged, with a slightly cracked voice. "This is getting out of control." However, everyone knew that the situation had already become unmanageable. Tension was no longer only caused by their comments. This was evident in the way they leaned forward, the way their voices rose and fell, and the fact that nobody else dared to fully enter the center. Fans later claimed that as the music waited to see how far it might go, they could almost feel the room holding its breath. "I said what I said," Bambi continued, her voice suddenly steady, as though she had reached a turning point, "and if you have a problem with it, let them know. As you sit here, don't act like I'm making things up." Mendeecees rose halfway from his seat, just enough to change the mood in an instant. One movement alone had an impact on the room. Someone in the back whispered something. Another person moved quickly, as though preparing for an unforeseen event. "You need to relax," he remarked, in a softer, more serious tone. "Because you've passed a line that you can't go back to." Bambi shot back, frozen. "Or maybe I've already passed it." And when it appeared like everything might go in any direction, that is the very moment that fans kept replaying. Everyone acknowledges that this was the turning point, the point at which authority started to wane. Some say they observed a rapid movement, but others say it was just the angle or the moment's chaos. Yandy's reaction at that precise moment is what people speak about the most. She seemed motionless, as though she wasn't sure whether to step in or retreat. Her visage grew overwhelmed, and her eyes filled with astonishment and panic, as if she was trying to digest too many emotions at once. She was clearly shaken. "Give up." Ultimately, she broke her voice and begged, "Just stop." This is not the desired course of action, as she advanced to try to position herself between them. But the room had completely transformed by the time they got there. The lines were blurred, there was no longer any peace, and everyone's current talks revolved around whatever had happened at that same moment. There is no doubt that the confrontation altered everything and caused everyone in the room to view each other differently. It was as though they all knew at once that nothing would be the same once Yandy intervened and attempted to stand in between them. While some believe things went too far, others maintain that everything was misunderstood. It appeared as though everything had halted for a little period of time, yet this was actually a moment of heightened anxiety rather than relaxation. Bambi didn't blink, back away, or even lower her voice. Her intensity did not change, as though she had already decided that there was no going back from what she had started. "No, don't try to calm this down now," she responded, in a calm but sharp voice. "Because real problems are never addressed when they come up. Not right now." Yandy Smith shook her head, clearly overwhelmed. "This isn't the way to do it," she said, her voice faltering slightly. "You're going too far." But Bambi's laughter was dry, meaning it came from frustration rather than humor. Is the distance too great? Or just finally saying what everyone else is scared to say? That cue had a different effect on the room. As the music played in the background, people could be seen looking at each other. Some of them leaned in a little, as though they didn't want to miss a word, while others lowered their eyes. Fans later asserted that this was the exact point at when the quarrel changed from a straightforward disagreement to something deeper and more personal. With a more rigid stance, Mendeecees Harris took another step forward. He didn't immediately raise his voice, but he spoke with a clear edge. "You need to watch how you're talking," he added quietly, "because right now you're talking about more than just yourself." "In fact," Bambi answered right away, "I'm not just talking about myself. That's the entire concept." The tension increased. It was no longer just about words. It was about what those words were revealing, what they were implying, and what the individuals in that room could have known but had never said. Emotions were running high, and even the air felt heavier, so each word added more weight to an already perilous situation. Yandy stepped forward, her palm lifted slightly as if to keep the distance between them from closing. "Please," she murmured, sounding almost pleading. "This is not something that should be handled in this manner, either here or in this manner." But Bambi had stopped listening. Or maybe she was, but she didn't care. Her gaze stayed on Mendeecees. "You keep acting like I'm making this up," she shot back, her voice steady but passionate. As though attempting to control himself, Mendeecees shook his head and inhaled deeply. "Like I just woke up today and decided to say all this for no reason. What you're doing right now is reckless," he replied. "You're discarding items without thinking about the impact they have on people." "To people?" Bambi raised her eyebrow once again. "Or to you?" was a pointed query. "You felt it." Fans later said that it was one of those moments when everything seemed to stop and even the smallest movement in the music seemed overwhelming. Someone shifted their posture in the backdrop. Another person completely averted their gaze, seemingly unwilling to participate in the action. Yandy's face changed again, this time with more overt emotion. Her eyes started to flood up with tears, and her lips pulled together as if she was trying to contain something. "I don't like where this is going," she muttered, nearly to herself, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's already there," Bambi declared without hesitation. Things began to shift at that point. Voices in the background started to grow a little, not from the main three, but from other people answering, whispering, and asking questions. Fans later described it as layers of pandemonium, with multiple smaller explosions happening at the same time instead of a single, enormous one. Mendeecees advanced one more step, drawing near enough to make everyone tense again. "You need to stop," he stated, in a now lowered, threatening tone. "I'm telling you that you don't want to follow this course." But Bambi did not move. She stood higher, as if to challenge him to speak more. "Or what?" she asked, sounding calm yet insistent. "What will happen if I do?" That question was not promptly answered. "Enough," Yandy said, breaking through the tension with a louder voice than before. The silence, which seemed to convey more information than anything else, lasted just long enough for everyone to feel nervous again, as if everything would change with the next move. Yandy moved completely between them, making room with her hands out. Even when she said, "This is enough," you could tell she wasn't in total control of the situation. "You too." Fans who watched this unfold online said that this was the moment when they felt the emotional weight hit the hardest. Her countenance was strained, her shoulders were rigid, and her eyes kept darting between, as if she were trying to keep something that was already crumbling together. "You see this?" The room seemed divided in a quiet, unpleasant way, rather than in a loud, obvious one, and people didn't know which side to take. It was not just the fight itself, but the repercussions it had on all sides. Bambi suddenly cried out and gestured to Yandy. "No one speaks up, because the moment you do, it turns into this." With tears beginning to form, Yandy shook her head. She whispered, "Don't put this on me," her voice cracking. "I'm working to prevent things from getting worse." Bambi was pressed. "Worse than what?" Mendeecees sighed in exasperation and wiped his face for a moment before turning back to her. "Worse than pretending everything is fine," he murmured. "You're not being fair," he said. "You take something and turn it into something else." "Or maybe I'm finally calling it what it is," she replied. That pause. There seemed to be a heavy, unsettling stillness that followed each big statement. The room itself didn't seem to be able to react. Yandy tried to gather herself by dabbing at her eyes right away, but it was clear that she was struggling. "This is not how this should be handled," she said, almost as if she were attempting to convince herself more than anybody else. But in reality, power had already been lost. Intense emotion, anxiety, and a situation that was hard for anyone to escape had taken the place of any boundaries that were supposed to exist. Fans on the internet started picking sides as soon as footage and discussions about it began to spread. Some said Bambi was legitimate and had every right to speak her truth, while others believed she went too far and that some subjects should never be discussed in that manner. As the conversation gained momentum, responses were received from both sides. But in that room, it had nothing to do with fans. Opinions have nothing to do with it. It concerned three people who found themselves in a predicament that clearly exceeded everyone's expectations. Every word, every pause, and every answer had meaning. As the tension eased into something more muted but no less potent, you could feel that whatever came next would not simply be another argument. Long after that specific moment had passed, they would all still recall it. The silence that followed was devoid of any sense of calm. Beneath the surface, something appeared to be breaking. For a moment, nobody moved, and even the smallest sounds in the room music seemed louder than they should have. Bambi stood exactly where she was, her shoulders set and her breathing steady, as though she had already said what needed to be said and didn't want to soften it. The only reason people felt uneasy was because Mendeecees Harris briefly looked away before looking back at her. It was more than just annoyance. Now, he seemed to be trying to figure out how serious this situation was and what he was ready to say next. He didn't say anything, but you could feel the tension leaving him as his jaw tightened and his hands flexed slightly. "You're pushing this too far," he finally said in a firm but quiet tone. "Maybe that line needed to be crossed," Bambi said without hesitation. She didn't have to speak loudly, but she did say, "There's a cue, and you crossed it." Every phrase landed exactly where it was meant to. Yandy stood between them, but she didn't appear to be merely attempting to defuse the situation. She seemed to be having difficulty maintaining her composure. Her hands gently dropped to her sides, and her shoulders sank slightly, revealing the weight of everything. With a shaky voice, she questioned, "Why are we even here right now?" This was not supposed to turn out this way, but nobody answered her immediately, which made it worse. A few voices started chatting in the background again, and the music was just loud enough to heighten the suspense without getting in the way. "You keep saying I crossed the line," Bambi said, keeping eye contact with Mendeecees, while Mendeecees chuckled momentarily, but didn't appear amused. Fans later described the moment when the room felt divided without anyone formally taking sides, with some turning to face Bambi and others to face Mendeecees. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," he replied, sounding tense. "But you won't even state what that sentence is. Why is that?" "Don't pretend you don't, then say it," she shot back. "Say it aloud." The challenge hovered in the air more than anything that had been said so far. Yandy closed her eyes for a bit, as if she was trying to ignore it, but when she opened them again, tears welled up in them. It was no longer simply about the words and song, but about bringing something that might not have been meant to be handled in this way into the open. "Please stop," she begged, in a softer, almost forlorn voice. "This isn't helping anything." Bambi maintained eye contact and continued, "It's helping me," which touched a new chord, "because I'm done staying quiet." Mendeecees moved to the side and paced a little more, as if he was trying to vent his annoyance rather than let it blow up. He rubbed his face again, paused, and turned back to face her. "You don't understand what you're doing," he continued in a tighter yet controlled voice. It had a sort of finality that made it obvious she wasn't going to back down no matter what happened next, even though it wasn't loud or confrontational. "You believe that this can be resolved by simply saying something and leaving, but that is not how it works," she asked in a straightforward yet composed manner. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like it only works when nobody says anything." That's still silence. It's longer and heavier this time. Yandy stepped back a little now, not quite moving away, but also removing herself from the space between them. She seems to recognize that she was no longer in charge of this. Like whatever had to happen was going to happen regardless of what she did. Fans later asserted that this song was the exact moment when the emotional shift became inevitable. Tension and anger persisted, but underneath it all was something more nuanced and personal. "You're hurting people with this," Mendeecees finally said, lowering his voice even more. "You're doing harm, not simply making a point." "Or maybe I'm exposing it," Bambi replied, and they simply looked at each other for a few seconds without saying anything. The stare was neither calm nor neutral. It contained everything that had been spoken and everything that hadn't. Yandy wiped her face once again and inhaled shakily as someone in the distance whispered, "This is getting bad." "It already is," someone else said. "I can't do this," she virtually whispered.